Okay.
Yeah, we're live.
Okay. You can go ahead and stop that one now. That's it. That's it right there. Thank you.
Your phone is on in your pocket.
It's not doing it, it's just hasn't turned on.
Terry's gonna be down here in just a bit, she'll have all of that information. I think he's actually done talking about 4 different things, 3 or 4.
Joe Burrow. You want to save you?
I hope so.
I think you want to do all right. He's got all the things around him. Got all the running back. You got all the receivers. AJ Green is AJ Green. Go dogs. Want to take 4 dogs? Everybody ready? Yes. All right.
Good Friday afternoon, everyone. We've got 4 events that we're going to talk about today, bring you up to speed. But what we're going to talk about first and foremost on our first 2 events are marijuana murder. You know, those people who think it's low-level, nonviolent marijuana, not dangerous, not violent, what are we reacting about? Well, when we finish explaining to you what happened in less than a 24-hour period to kids, I think you'll agree with me that this is not a low-level, nonviolent event. Let me start with Tristan Williams. Tristan Williams and a friend of his at about 4:30 on Tuesday afternoon went to Xavier's mobile home where he lived, and they went there to either match or snatch. And you go, well, what's match or snatch? Well, either we're going to match marijuana, you bring yours, I have mine, we'll smoke yours, that's match, or snatch. The reason we're using all of their names is, as it turns out, some of them are victims, but they're victims because they were robbers. Well, Tristan was driven there by Reese Glosson. Glosson, we don't use his picture today because he's deceased, but never mind. Reese asked Tristan, do you want to go to Bartow and smoke some free marijuana? And he said, sure, I'm up for that. On the way down there, Reese told Tristan, now we might snatch this marijuana, so instead of matching, we may be snatching. So they went to Xavier's house, and for about 45 minutes to an hour, they sat around and smoked marijuana. And then Reese said, hey, I've got to go to work. So as he stood up, Xavier says to him, hey, how about my money for the marijuana I sold you? At that time, Reese punched Xavier at least twice. Xavier returned fire with a firearm, shooting Reese Glosson 2 times. This case is under investigation, but we believe that Xavier certainly has an argument for a stand your ground case. Now, while that's happening, while he's punched and he's shot, Reese grabs the marijuana, gives it to Tristan, tells Tristan to run. Tristan gets outside. Xavier comes out with a gun, points it at Tristan, and says, "Come back in and get your buddy, and then get out of here." So when Xavier and Tristan go back in, Reese obviously is down for the count and can't get up, so they put him into the back seat of the car. Tristan takes off and ultimately ends up at Bartow Hospital. We get call from the hospital. That's the only call we received on this entire event, that, hey, there's a guy here that we've just pronounced deceased with gunshot wounds. Xavier, meanwhile, does he call the sheriff's office? No, he doesn't. He proceeds to clean up the blood in the house, destroyed his cell phone, and hid the gun and did away with the casings from the firearm, and we don't know what other evidence he might have destroyed at this point in the investigation. But ironically, Xavier is 19, Tristan is 18, Reese is 19. They're all kids. But what we have is we have Tristan and Reese that went to Xavier's and ultimately tried to rob him of his marijuana, which he was trying to sell to them. That's why I tell you it's not a low-level nonviolent crime. So we're sorting through all of this, and quite frankly, at the end of the day, if Xavier had just dialed 911 and stood there, depending on how the end of the investigation comes out, it's certainly looking that way now, he might have had a clear stand your ground case. So we've locked him up, not for murder, but for destroying evidence, for tampering with evidence, for possession of marijuana, for possession of paraphernalia. Oh, did I tell you that he was already out on bond for possession of Xanax? So we did what we call a Parker v. State. He can't get out of jail, but once again, he's still not charged with a murder. Tristan, we just picked him up a little while ago. We're at the point in the investigation the homicide detectives felt comfortable, where Tristan, who took the marijuana from the robbery and ran, is charged with felony murder and robbery by sudden snatching because his buddy was killed in the act of them robbing Xavier from his marijuana. That's a little confusing. But that's what's happening so far. This case is still under investigation. Well, this all happened around 4:30-ish on Tuesday afternoon. Listen to me, folks. Less than 24 hours later, we now have our second murder for marijuana. Our second one in less than 24 hours. So for those of you who want to say, well, the first one was an aberration and marijuana is still a low-level, nonviolent crime, try to explain that to the family of the next case. Here's our two suspects. Corey Boland, who's 18, Cedric Myers, who's 20, still just kids. In fact, both of them are still on juvenile probation from crimes they committed as juveniles. So anyway, Corey goes to a friend of his in Lake Hamilton, and he says, hey, I need to borrow your Chevy. It's a white Chevy, a 2006, because I'm going to go make a play. So the friend loans him the car. Corey rides by, picks up Cedric Myers, who also lives in the Lake Hamilton area, and they promptly go to the Days Inn on I-4 and 27, where they are met by Deontay Bugg, who's only 22 years old, another kid. They want to buy marijuana. Deontay Bugg is staying at the Days Inn at I-4 and 27. Deontay is originally from the Haines City area. However, he currently lives in Georgia, but he's back down here selling marijuana. So Bugg goes out to talk to Corey and Cedric, and they go, hey, you got marijuana? And Deontay says, yeah, I got marijuana for sale. And they said, well, we're going to go get our money. We'll be back. Deontay said, that's cool. He goes back inside. He tells his buddy who's there, he said, I don't feel good about this. I think I'm about to be robbed. So in just a few minutes, the white Chevy comes back. Corey and Cedric are in the vehicle. And does Deontay Bugg follow his intuition and his instincts? Nope. He takes the marijuana, goes back down there to sell it to Corey and Cedric. When he gets down there and he hands them the marijuana and to get the money, Cedric points a gun at him and shoots him. And then they drive off and leave him for dead, and ultimately he dies in the parking lot of the Days Inn. Our detectives get involved in the case. We ultimately find the white vehicle in Lake Hamilton, find the owner of the vehicle, and he said, man, I don't know anything about killing anybody and buying marijuana. I'll just loan the car to Corey. Well, let me give you some pictures here. Here's Cedric with his guns and his money. HB is what he's spelling with his money. Cedric, who's 20 years of age, is now charged with first-degree murder, armed robbery with a firearm. He's done, at 20 years old, robbery with a firearm and murder. Let me show you our victim, Deontay Bugg. Guns and money. He's bragging. These are Facebook photos. He's bragging about all the money he's making and the guns. It's not a new statement, but if you live by the gun, you die by the gun. And that's what happened to Deontay. He's only 22 years old. So let's go back and look over this last week for those who think marijuana is not a dangerous commodity. Over the last week, in less than 24 hours on Tuesday and Wednesday, you got Deontay Bugg, who's dead at 22. You got Corey Boland, who's charged at 18 years of age with murder and robbery with a firearm. You've got Cedric Myers, who's charged at 20 years of age with murder and robbery with a firearm. You've got Tristan, who's 18 years of age, charged with accessory felony murder, robbery by sudden snatching. You've got Xavier, who, while he may or may not, appears that he may have a stand your ground case, is still tampering with evidence, possession of cannabis, and he's parkered for another drug charge. And you've got our victims. Our victims are kids. So for those who want to suggest anything other than marijuana is a commodity that can get you killed, that it's really not dangerous, it's really not a big deal, here's your signs. Here's your signs. All kids, 18 to 22 years of age. If that doesn't break your heart to think about kids dying like that, nothing will. Are there any questions on these before we move on to our other events today?
Nothing seemed connected to it, Sheriff.
Excuse me?
Nothing seemed connected with the murders.
Nothing connected. This was two separate, totally separate incidents. But we would be naive to think if this is the only two marijuana sales that occurred at gunpoint or threat of gunpoint, or the only two robberies over drugs. Folks, I've said it for decades in my career. Drugs are ruining the young people of our society. And it has cost two their life, and it's caused the rest of them ostensibly to go to prison for decades or the rest of their life. I see a bunch of kids' lives ruined over marijuana, robbery, guns, and shooting. Well, my next event today is my